David Muir has long been a symbol of trust and authority in the world of TV news. He dresses well, has a strong presence, and people trust his voice. However, recent events have put a shadow over that well-formed picture. False rumors that he was fired spread like wildfire, and there was a confusing moment on air while covering the wildfires. All of these things put Muir in the middle of an unexpected media storm. People who disagree with him say that he puts appearances over truth. Some insiders say it's typical Muir behavior. Now even other reporters are starting to doubt the man who was once thought to be invincible. What was once thought of as background noise is now making waves at ABC and maybe making Muir doubt himself. What really took place behind the scenes? And is this the fall of one of the most well-known names in network news? What you expect might not be the answer. The kid who made the news. David Muir didn't become one of the most known faces on TV all of a sudden. He began his trip a long time ago, before the cameras and lights. He was just a kid in upstate New York with a dream and a trench coat. People who knew David back then weren't surprised that he is now the host of World News Tonight. That kid did more than just talk about what he wanted to be. That's what he did. David went as a news reporter every Halloween, while other kids dressed up as monsters or superheroes. The whole outfit, trench coat, notepad, and all. He wasn't doing it just for fun either. He really meant it. He always told his friends that he was going to be famous soon. David took the news very seriously, even though he was only a kid. He would drop everything and rush inside when the news came on, while other kids rode bikes or played ball in the afternoon. He had no choice but to miss it. For him it wasn't just a plan, it was getting ready. He was already starting to look for that life. He was already talking to professionals in the 6th grade to figure out how to get in. Ron Curtis is a news reporter in Syracuse, and he wrote him a letter. He wrote back, and that letter made him very angry. Soon David went to WTVH, the station where Curtis worked, and asked if he could help in any way. It didn't matter what the job was. He carried tripods, tore up scripts, wrote down interviews, and even got reporters sodas. He was there for them no matter what they needed. He loved every second. He felt like he had a second home in the office. He was there so much over the summer, and during school breaks, that the staff started writing down his height on the wall. They would talk about how quickly he seemed to be changing into the man he would become, and how his voice was getting deeper. That was mostly because of his parents. Sometimes they didn't want to drive him to and from the station, but they did it anyway. David was in that newsroom all the time, even during the summer and on vacations. Even when they were tired, his folks never let him miss a chance. He did talks on camera when he was still in high school, even with braces and a haircut from the 1990s. He did not care how he seemed or spoke. He had it. He didn't slow down when he got to college. He took the chance to study in Spain while he was at Ithaca College. It was a dream for a kid who wanted to be a reporter and see the world. He learned a new language at school, and lived with a Spanish family. He took in everything. At every dinner they talked about politics, society, and everyday life. He didn't know it at the time, but he would do the same thing on air one day, talking to people, asking them questions, and telling them stories. He remembered that time in Spain. He could see the world in a new way after that. His mind was more clear than ever when he came back. When he got back to Syracuse, he got his first job at the same station where he had volunteered before. He used to carry stuff, but now he had his own job as a reporter and then as an anchor. He had lived in his city for 5 years and was ready for the next step. When Boston called, it was a big market with a lot of attention and high hopes. It was ready for Muir. In the end, he said that his time in Boston was like a real crash school in news broadcasting. The people there wanted more than just the news. They wanted to know a lot about everything, from sports and politics to snowstorms and problems at City Hall. Each story was important. Muir made sure he was ready for the task. He worked hard and kept going until ABC News hired him in 2003. He started by hosting World News Now, the network's overnight show that people who get up early and people who stay up late could both watch. Even though he was working odd hours, Muir was slowly getting better and better until he was soon sent all over the world to cover big news stories. Soon after starting at ABC, he was asked to host World News Tonight on the weekends. During the week, Diane Sawyer ran that show. Muir had looked up to Sawyer for years. Being in charge of the weekend slot meant more than just sitting in a chair. Taking on a heritage was what it meant. He was aware of it and liked it. It became more and more common to talk about Muir over time. By 2009, even TMZ was paying attention. They called him the Brad Pitt of news reporters, which was an odd name but showed how well known he was becoming. He got one of the best breaks of his career in 2012 when he was in charge of covering the presidential race. He was more than just a face on TV. He was really tough questions. In the public eye, Mitt Romney had to show his tax records, and Muir wouldn't let up. People stopped and paid attention because of that. But it wasn't easy at all. His rise to fame wasn't just a lucky accident. He gave up a lot. Weekends became more like work, and free time almost vanished. He worked almost every day of the week, not because anyone asked him to, but because he was so excited about the news. The goal wasn't to get noticed. He really enjoyed the chase, telling stories, and having to be responsible. Oh, and this wasn't a job for the company only. Muir was outside, going right where most people were trying to stay away from. In 2013, he was in Tehran to see for himself how the US sanctions were affecting regular Iranians. Reporting like that didn't happen at a desk. You had to be ready to take chances and have feet on the ground. The numbers showed that it made a difference that he kept hosting the weekend shows. People watched because he brought news stories from far away to life. He was in Cairo during the Tahrir Square movement, in Japan after the terrible tsunami, and in Somalia, where he was the first American news anchor to cover the famine in Mogadishu. That job became dangerous. While keeping records on the 8 attempts he and his crew were shot at, they kept going anyway. The stories he brought back were sad. In Somalia, he saw refugee camps that were so full that newcomers had nowhere to go. Later he talked about how heartbreaking it was to see unimaginable pain happen while everyone else went on with their lives. The rise of anchor in America. David Muir finally reached the goal he'd had since he was a child in 2014. Tonight he became the host of the World News. It was a big event that most people can only imagine. It was a strange feeling when he took over the place that Diane Sawyer had been sitting in before him. In the same year Sawyer lost her husband, the famous director Mike Nichols. At the same time, Muir was already well known thanks to 2020. He was now taking on the most important job of his career. It didn't take ABC a long time to decide to make Muir the face of their evening news. The person in charge there, James Goldston, said that Muir had been getting ready for this moment for years. It made sense to them, and it worked out. The numbers started going up quickly before he had even been in office for a year. It got ahead of the other news shows, and became the most watched evening news show in the United States. But Muir knew he shouldn't settle down too much. It's always been a battle between ABC, NBC, and CBS. He said that the stress was real, and that it made him feel bad. Still, everyone at ABC was sure he would last. As the 2016 election got closer, his talks started to get a lot of attention. There was one time that stood out, his meeting with Hillary Clinton, where he asked her why she was using a personal email server while she was Secretary of State. The conversation was a turning point. It was her first public act of responsibility. She admitted she made a mistake and took blame. The video went viral and became one of the most talked about and important moments in the campaign. The story's other side then came out. After Donald Trump won, Muir got the first job interview after the inauguration. It turned out to be very dangerous. Trump changed his mind about Mexico paying for the wall and talked about bringing back waterboarding. He also claimed that the crowd at his inauguration was the biggest ever, even though there was no proof. You didn't just hear the news in that kind of conversation. You were there when the power of it happened. And when COVID-19 hit, Muir had to change gears just like everyone else in the field. Things changed in the office overnight. A lot of news anchors started to broadcast from home, and Muir was ready with everything set up in his West Village house. Even though the studio was almost always empty, he still decided to go there most days. He had to make that choice every day. As long as he was healthy and able, he wanted to be there to tell them the news himself. As soon as the pandemic started, an incredibly large number of Americans started watching the evening news again. Reports say that World News Tonight and NBC Nightly News both had about 12 million watchers, which is almost the same number. The most people had watched in 20 years. This many people watched World News Tonight last time, in 2000. Muir felt the weight of the moment as more people looked at him than ever before. It was clear to him that people were scared. There was a public health crisis, the economy was unstable, and there were real questions about who was running the country. Even though he wasn't a doctor or a leader, he thought his job was important. He thought it was his job every night to help people make sense of the chaos, and feel a little less alone in it. The quiet war, Stephanopoulos versus Muir. There's always drama in the press, but the tension between David Muir and George Stephanopoulos feels more like a slow-burning TV show than a normal rivalry at work. From the late 1990s until now, George had been with ABC News and had been top anchor since 2014. But over time, David Muir, who was younger, ready for the camera, and rising quickly, started to move into that area. George wasn't too happy about it either. The stress goes back many years. When Diane Sawyer quit World News Tonight, the most important show in the evening for anyone who works in TV news, George secretly hoped it would be his turn. On Good Morning America, he already had a job, but the evening news job was the one he really wanted. What was wrong was that networks were finding mornings to be much more useful. George was one of the main reasons why GMA made so much money.